My name is Rick Williams. I'm the Business Inclusion Manager for the City of Pittsburgh, Office of Equity, Office of Mayor William Peduto. This show is called Inclusion Counts. Inclusion Counts is a show that educates, informs, and inspires minority, women, and veteran contractors across the state of Pennsylvania with a local focus. It's a monthly conversation with subject matter experts, government practitioners, and businesses that operate in the space every day. The goal of the program is to share resources, provide capacity building information, and to promote contract opportunities for vendors in this region. Our first guest today on Inclusion Counts is Sue Broadus, the DBE Program Manager of Port Authority of Allegheny County. Sue has over 30 years in contract compliance and government certification experience, specifically for the Pennsylvania Uniform Certification Program, known as the PAUCP. Ms. Broadus has personally certified over 10,000 local vendors in her past and current roles at Port Authority of Allegheny County. Welcome to our show, Sue.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So, how are you managing the difficulties that COVID-19, the pandemic, has caused in your personal and professional life?
I think I've been handling it pretty well. I've been doing a lot of work remotely from home. However, that has not stopped the certification process for the Port Authority. Thanks to Teams and Zoom, I'm still able to assist applicants with the individual certification counseling appointments to help them guide them through the certification process and to answer any questions that they may have regarding the application or the personal network statement form, because oftentimes when they take an initial look at that application and the PNW, they tend to get overwhelmed. And then through the modern technology where they're able to share their screen with me and I can see based on how they've answered their questions within the application, what support and documentation that they will be required to provide. I've also been conducting the on-site reviews for these applicants via Teams, which at a later date, I will be going out to their physical location, but not to hold up the certification process, since the Port Authority is very proactive in encouraging and trying to get as many minority and women-owned businesses certified with the PAUCP.
So by making those adjustments, does it take a longer time to certify someone?
A little bit, I would say. At my age, I find it a little more challenging as far as trying to do everything via virtual video conferencing and stuff like that. And sometimes it's hard. Like I said, I'm still going to have to go out physically to verify the locations to see their operations and their equipment and verify that information. But at this time, USDOT, which governs the certification guidelines for the DBE certification, permits us to conduct these on-site reviews and to go ahead with the certification process.
So would you say that your process is with the DOT, and can you talk to our listeners and kind of explain what the DOT is and what is the process in regards to contracting?
As far as certification, you mean?
As far as certification is concerned, yes.
So the USDOT, is the United States Department of Transportation, which governs and oversees all of the DBE programs. And those are the guidelines. They provide the regulations and guidelines for the DBE program and DBE certification. Every state in the United States has a unified certification program, which we all follow the same government regulations and guidelines and have the same exact process.
And so doing that, I mean, as far as Allegheny County contracts that you're doing with that Port Authority, what would you say the toughest challenge is for vendors that are trying to get the contract and then getting the DBE participation on those contracts?
Well, first, let me start by saying that in order to do business with the Port Authority, contractors must be registered through our e-business portal. Then, as far as bidding on the contracts, for federally funded contracts, there is a DBE goal requirement that they need to attain. Those goals are set on all federally funded DOT money contracts that are funded with DOT or federally transportation funds. As far as DBEs, obtaining work with these prime contractors, I strongly encourage that they would pay attention to the Port Authority's website, which posts when upcoming pre-bids and information meetings are, so they get acclimated with those primes that are entertaining the idea of submitting a bid, and reach out to those contractors and market their business to them. Hey, I'm a certified DBE. I provide XYZ service. That information is always available on the Port Authority website as to upcoming proposals and contracts. I tell all the certified firms that they need to check that at least on a monthly basis to see what's coming down the pike, and then reach out to them. As far as the challenges that I see for DBEs that wish to bid on projects, oftentimes I think it's the capacity building or the bonding requirements that may be a hindrance to them. But like I said, all all federally funded projects that are bid out for the Port Authority have DBE participation requirements mandated in those contract documents.
Okay, and what is that mandated process? If I'm a vendor and I want a Port Authority contract and I'm coming as a prime to you, what are the steps do I need to be considered for the contract if you're going to award me as the prime?
You, as a prime, you are going to have to demonstrate and provide documentation of your DBE participation, those DBE firms that you have reached out to and entered into agreements with, reflecting what the service that those DBEs are going to provide, the percentage of work, the dollar amount that you've entered into with those DBEs, and then that information is going to be eventually come to me for approval. And I'm going to ascertain that the firms that they have submitted, the DBEs, one, are actually certified, yes, currently certified as a DBE with the PAUCP. Two, that these firms that they are submitting for their DBE participation are actually certified to perform in the scope of services that the primes have identified that the DBE subs will be working on for this particular project. And I, in turn, will be confirming with the identified DBEs that, yes, they have entered into an agreement with this prime for X amount of dollars to provide this scope of service.
Okay, let's take one step back. What is the PAUCP, and how does that relate to the DOT and in the process that you've mentioned?
So as I stated before, every state in the United States has a unified certification program that certifies minority and women-owned businesses and or women-owned businesses as a disadvantaged business enterprise. The PAUCP is the Pennsylvania Unified Certification Program, of which there are 5 certifying agencies for the state. PAUCP DBE certification. Those 5 agencies are, 1, the Port Authority of Allegheny County, the Allegheny County Department of Equity and Inclusion, PennDOT, the SEPTA, which is the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, and then we have the Philadelphia International Airport. All 5 of these agencies certify firms and process the applications for DBE certification. Once any of these firms or once any of these agencies certifies a firm, we enter those firms into the PAUCP directory, DBE directory, and that is where all interested contractors, organizations are referred to for seeking out certified firms. Not only is it just recognized with the certifying agencies themselves, but you'd be surprised at the number of other city, state, city and state government agencies and authorities that also accept this DBE certification.
So if I'm a registered DBE with a PAUCP certification, I'm eligible across the state for any contract.
You are, if it requires to have DBE participation, yes, that is correct.
So it would be in my best interest to get the PAUCP certification under the DBE designation.
Yes.
Do
The nice thing about the DBE certification is once you are approved certification, it technically does not expire. You do have an annual requirement each year by your certification anniversary date of updating your information and providing the latest tax returns. Let me go back to say DBE certification means that 1, not only do you fall under the presumptive minority and or woman group, but 2, that you also fall under the socially and economically disadvantaged status where 1, your business is considered a small business by SBA size standards, and 2, that the personal net worth of the DBE owner does not exceed the $1.32 million threshold. So each year you are providing an annual affidavit, and a copy of your latest tax return. And we evaluate that information to ensure that you still meet the eligibility criteria, that you do not exceed the SBA size standards, and your personal net worth is still under the $1.32 million threshold.
Thank you, Sue, for breaking that down. Because a lot of people really don't understand.
And also the nice thing about the PAUCP certification is it is one of the few free certifications, and that there's no fee for going through this process. Furthermore, as we all know, here in Pennsylvania, there's oftentimes where a contracting opportunity may become available in the state of Ohio or in West Virginia. However, prior to you being able to get that opportunity, they may require that you do the certification in that state as well. And the very first question that they're going to ask you is, are you currently certified by your home state as a DBE? You are able to say yes, and then there is an interstate process, which is a much shorter process that you can do to obtain your Ohio DBE certification and your West Virginia DBE certification, and any state in the United States as well.
That's great. I mean, I'm hoping at some point that we could have some type of reciprocity agreements with our neighboring states to kind of expedite that process. I mean, that's something probably we should look at for as a city and also as a county to make it easier for minorities and women to have contracts across state lines, so to speak. I want to roll back, and we have a few more minutes, Sue, and thanks again for coming on the show. I know you do a little bit of compliance, and I wanted to ask you a question about how can the level of non-compliance with contractors be mitigated? You know, how can we reduce that in the process? You know, is it, you know, once it's awarded, or is it during the process itself? How do we kind of monitor that after the contract leaves the door?
Well, I believe it starts at the beginning of the contract prior to award. I think oftentimes a lot of the agencies, well, as far as the DBE participation, that is automatically mandated. So there's compliance there. Hey, if you are interested in working, let's say on the BRT project that's coming down the road, that is going to be federally funded. You are going to have DBE participation. No ifs, ands, or buts. The areas that I find that have that are harder to enforce are those contracts for Port Authority specifically saying, or it would be the state-funded contracts, because those state-funded contracts you are not able to set a goal on. They go by good faith efforts. So to me, it seems like for organizations and various government agencies, I believe that it should start from before award. That if you could go so far as to requiring that the diverse business participation or the DB participation is required at the time of bid submission. I think that would be and counted as part of the bid submission. I think that would be very helpful. To even after you award the bid is awarded, I think there needs to be constant monitoring of that contract to ensure, hey, you stated that Joe's excavating company is going to be doing the excavation work. Let me know when they're going to be on the project. Verifying that the submitted DBEs and diverse businesses are actually performing in the capacity that they were submitted as. Also monitoring the payments to those subs to ensure that the primes are paying their subs, and verifying that the amounts are close to or are going to total up to what the original submission was.
So currently, Port Authority has the challenge of being able to kind of monitor once the contract is submitted, to look at the participation, and then after the contract has left the door and is currently in process, it's almost the same amount of energy and level of resources that are necessary to make sure that those percentages are met and those DBEs are utilized.
That is correct. It doesn't end it does not end at the bid submission or 7 days afterwards when the primes have identified their diverse businesses. It's a continual process, ensuring that those firms are actually performing, ensuring that those firms are actually getting paid within the time frame. If there's any issues with payment or any issues with their performances, so it is a constant work in progress for the duration of that project.
Well, Sue, I know I'm going to have to bring you back at some point. You know, Port Authority has did a lot under your leadership in the short period that you've been there, and let's continue these discussions. Thanks again.
I'd be delighted.
For being on
Thank you for having me.
Take care now.
Take care. Have a good day.
You too. Welcome back to Inclusion Counts. Our second guest is Dave Pinkosky from the Small Business Administration. As we mentioned in the last show, Dave will be a recurring guest that will provide us federal programming information and results in our region. Welcome again, Dave.
Thank you, Rick. Very happy to be here.
So, can you give us a quick update on our viewers on how the Southwestern Pennsylvania businesses fared on the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Impact Disaster Loan Program for Southwestern Pennsylvania?
Yeah, actually I can. We just got some numbers just released within the past 24 hours. So forgive me if I end up reading a little bit. I normally have a lot of this stuff committed to memory and everything, but being that it's brand new, haven't had a chance to really do that. But obviously, you know, the PPP and the Paycheck Protection Programs, or Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL programs, which was the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan Program, you know, they were critical programs that came about due to the pandemic disaster response, and they were mobilized within about 6 days. These programs were actually put together at the federal level, and by far it was the biggest volume and value of loans that the SBA has ever done in our 67-year history. Actually, we've done more this year with those programs, due to those programs, than we ever have in our history since we became a federal agency in 1953. So yeah, we actually had some really great numbers, and heard a lot of positive feedback from businesses that have received those loan funds, that have helped them stay afloat and keep their doors open. So just to give you some numbers here on a national level, there was actually about $750 billion from those programs that was put out on a national scale to our small business sector to help them recover and everything, which was just, again, an amazing number. PPP itself provided more than 5.2 million loans worth $525 billion. In the EIDL program, we had 3.6 million loans valued at $191 billion. And within the EIDL program, we also had the EIDL Advance in the beginning of that program before that funding was exhausted. And that was, there were 5.7 million EIDL advances put out that were valued at $20 billion. So we had a lot of money that was put out onto the street to our small business communities, and thanks to those efforts and those funding, and that funding kept those businesses afloat during the pandemic.
Lastly, do you have any information on how minorities and women fared nationally through the SBA supported loan programs?
Yeah, absolutely. Our lenders told us that for the minority owners, they received through our 7A and 504 lending, received $7.5 billion in loan funds. That was about 27% of SBA's overall loan portfolio. So again, that's a pretty big number. Specifically to women through those programs, they had $2.7 billion allocated to them through the 7A program. And the 504 lending program was $522 million. And then loans to veterans from both total nearly $835 million. So again, we're talking about some really big numbers. And I also would just like to point out too, that with regards to the PPP, about 27% of the loan dollars, specifically from the PPP, were made to low and moderate income communities, which was in proportion to the population diversity in those areas. So, the money was getting to the right people, we feel, in a lot of cases. And there was also more than $133 billion of PPP loans that went to companies based in our historically underutilized business zones. And around 80 billion, or about 15% of the dollars, went to small businesses in rural communities. And again, those numbers are on a national level.
Okay, Dave, you mentioned 7A and you mentioned 504. Can you take a few minutes to explain what those programs are?
Sure. Those are our traditional SBA lending programs, a couple of them. We actually have a number of different SBA loan products that companies can access. So some of them, without getting into a lot of the intricacies of the different loan programs and the ins and outs, they can be used for things like equipment purchases, real estate, maybe project renovations, and kind of depending on some different things you have going on with your business, what industry you're in, or what exactly you're looking to get loan funding for, to fund fund your project, that would kind of dictate what loan product would best suit you. So we have like our SBA Express loan program, we have the micro loan program. Again, we have the 504, the 7A. Some of those are for bigger projects, smaller projects, amongst all those different types of industries and projects that I mentioned that you might be looking for. So that's kind of the overall scale of what they are.
Is there an annual revenue that a business has to meet to be required, to be considered for those contracts?
No, not typically. There are some different loan qualifications and things that can be helpful. Obviously, you have to be a for-profit business, but as long as you're a for-profit company, and you've exhausted like some other options, especially our programs are great if you've not been able to get traditional funding, because we don't lend money directly, but we actually back the loan that the banks make to the companies. So that's kind of how our programs work when it comes to the loans. But other than being a small business, obviously it's always number one for us because of course we are the Small Business Administration, so that's our focus. But as long as you're a small business, there's a very good chance there could be a loan product for you that we can take a look at that we could potentially help you with.
Okay, Dave, thank you for the update. I know next month you have a major announcement for us to share on the show, so we can't wait for that.
All right, sounds good, my friend.
All right, we'll see you next month, and thanks again, Dave.
All right, Rick, take care.
All right.
Work.
Since 1982, City Channel Pittsburgh has been your home for your government. Over the last half-decade, we've edited over 1,000 press conferences, budget forums, award ceremonies, PSAs, and interview programs. Our staff has over 6 decades of combined experience, and they televise over 150 city council meetings annually from right here in our control room. And when seemingly nothing else is going right, we can always fall back on our training from college. We are City Channel Pittsburgh, and we've got your government covered.
Welcome back to Inclusion Counts. We have our final guest for today. Her name is Ms. Kaye Bealer, founder and CEO of the Fiscal Firm, a full-service management consulting firm headquartered in Dallas, Texas, a woman-owned and minority-owned consulting firm with nationwide experience. This Fiscal Firm specializes in financial analysis, management consulting, and workforce and talent development. She's committed to public service and supplying clients with innovation solutions to solve complex problems. Kaye has over 20 years of experience in public sector consulting, and 15 of those years have been at the helm of her own practice. She has provided a wide range of consulting services that lead to projects that happen, projects that work with tangible results measured in terms of continued sustainability and economic viability, new investments, increased quality of life, and new master plans based on strong community consensus. Welcome to the show, Kaye.
Thank you for having me.
So, how is everything going on in Dallas during these multiple pandemics that you guys are facing?
Well, it's definitely interesting. Texas is a little bit different because we really tried to stay open for business. So some of it's been a little challenged because there are two extremes. There's times where it feels like there's no pandemic because everybody tries to keep going. And then times where, like this, every meeting that we have is Zoom or things like that. But the kids are back in school. Restaurants are at 50% capacity. So people are just trying to see what this new normal is.
Yeah, that was kind of my next follow-up. Like, how are you holding up and what type of adjustments have you made?
Well, I always have had a home office, and being a consultant, although I had office staff and have right-sized and at times scaled up, scaled down, I've always been able to work from anywhere. So I think that pivot really was kind of easy. The adjustments I've had to make was really getting my clients accustomed to that, because typically in the public sector, you're meeting a lot, you're in person. And so we all had to change. And how does technology, a lot of us had to make adjustments. So doing the Zooms and sending information beforehand. And I really had to get a lot more organized as well, because making sure that everybody has everything before the meetings, screen shares, things like that. So it's been a lot of adjustments, but good adjustments, because I don't think we'll go back to a lot of the paper and in-person meetings that we had.
Yeah, it seems like that. I mean, even the city of Pittsburgh, we're trying to do paperless in our contract process with like a DocuSign process to be more expedient. We have a buying plan that we're going to be unveiling for the upcoming year. Our recurring guests that we have from the procurement department will be sharing that next month. And kind of moving to be having a local conversation just for a few minutes here.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have a business in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
That focused on water treatment for our local water authority and our sanitation authority. Can you briefly talk about that a little bit, the type of work and the scope while you were in town here, while your business was in Pittsburgh?
Okay, my scope was more financial and management consulting in that space. So if you think about the consent decree and some of the things that Alcosan and the city of Pittsburgh are having to do, and all of the 83 municipalities within that service area, really looking at clean water and responding to the Department of Justice, their suit with the county and the city. So a lot of that had to do with the financial analysis thereof. What could the residents afford to pay? And we looked at median household income. So my scope was kind of where engineering and finance meet. So you had a technical solution, but then you had what's economically feasible. What can we pay for, and what can we, being the city and the county at the time, and also what can the residents afford to pay? So it was kind of that knee of the curve analysis of where they meet. And that was an iterative process. So that took a lot of work, really proud of the results. They're now in the phase of implementing a lot of those things. So that was a lot of my work when I was in town. So a lot of analysis, lots of meetings, and it really opened a lot of doors for me as well.
And how long was your business in Pittsburgh?
My business was in Pittsburgh 12 years. And I lived in Pittsburgh for 9.
So you had different headquarters and so forth in Dallas?
Yes,
and
but
Pittsburgh?
well, I started, I'm originally from Dallas. And so when I started, something interesting started coming about around 2000, 2001, where the EPA started really looking at wet weather agencies, and Alcosan, being a sewer agency, really looking at their discharges and really looking at what financially they needed to do. And so looking at that long-term programming, I knew that Dallas did not have the kind of weather that you have in the Midwest and Northeast. They didn't have the kind of infrastructure. So the Midwest and Northeast became a really attractive place for me to do business. And so I was traveling there every week. So it just made sense to move, because the expenses, you couldn't be competitive traveling every week. And so once I moved, I wanted to scale my business up, and the opportunities just came. I moved from Dallas to Chicago, wanted to try Chicago, remember that. And then I moved to Pittsburgh. So moved to Pittsburgh and was there full time for 9 years. So.
And then at one point you decided to change.
Right.
And so what was the aha moment, so to speak?
Well, the aha moment for me was, and Pittsburgh was great. Pittsburgh, for a lot of reasons, had a lot of resources for small businesses, that some of which I still have not found after leaving the region. The challenge was, not being from Pittsburgh, you could kind of hit a ceiling, because when people are asking what school you're going to, they're not asking what college. It's like, what high school, what part of town were you from? So you had a lot of regional kind of silos. And once I had a son, life changed, And so it was a couple of things. It was needing that family support, but also hitting that ceiling as the programs and things changed, as the community changed. It just really felt like I had done everything that I could do in that region. And some of it was where the program was, because we had submitted to the EPA, we had done the financial capability assessment, things like that. So it was kind of time. I went to Cincinnati first, and I kind of followed the program. So programs for infrastructure have peaks and valleys. So you're gonna do planning, design, and construction. And in planning and design, that's a lot of analysis. And so the aha moment was you're kind of hitting the ceiling with what you could do as far as financial analysis in that context, and wanting to be close to family.
So the program itself changing based off of regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Was there another challenge in regards to being a woman-owned business, and specifically a Black woman-owned business, or that didn't matter?
I think there was. I think you have kind of two layers. Sometimes you don't know if it's gender, sometimes if it's race. The challenge was, when I started working in Pittsburgh 10, 12, 13 years ago now, maybe 15 years ago now, they didn't have the programs, and they didn't have as many small businesses, especially in the engineering community, because water and sewer and public sector, that's big engineering community. And so you had average age, I think at the time, Water Environment Federation said 52-year-old white man. So think about you're 52-year-old white man, and I'm a 32-year-old Black woman. And so you're trying to move in this space that is not necessarily familiar with dealing with executives that look like you. So at times it was very isolating. And when you have your own business, it's oftentimes hard to find that support, because you don't have this big corporate structure. You create your structure. Whereas everybody else is, you may be meeting with a director of a firm or a VP, but you're the CEO, but they're not necessarily treating you like a CEO. So I got a lot of that I think in a lot of ways changes you. Also, the challenges with hiring and retaining in the region, because since there are not a lot of Black women, or there may be more now, CEOs, trying to hire employees, because finance and engineering, typically, again, white males. And so you're trying to hire. And I remember we were going for a big project at the time. And one of my employees said at the time, okay, nobody ever, little white boys don't grow up dreaming about working for a Black woman. And I'll never forget that. I'm like standing in my office. And so, we were talking about the challenges in hiring and retaining. And so there was a lot of times where I felt like I have to pay more. You have cash flow, because it's kind of like having children. You don't want your employees to feel some of the things that you feel. So you try to insulate them from the realities, but they would tell me different comments and things that they got. So it definitely had its unique challenges, being a woman and being a woman of color, being a Black woman particularly.
Wow. And so it sounded like you had to pay a premium for talent.
Yep.
And I guess the other challenge is the support structure that you mentioned.
Right.
And so let me ask you another question on that. What type of support structure would be necessary for you to stay in that industry? I know that you're not in that industry now, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
What type of things you would need if you needed to get back into this type of work?
I think one of the things is working capital. That's huge, because you have a professional services firm, and when you're starting, or even mid-size, you don't have a lot of collateral per se. And it takes a while to build up that backlog where you have cash coming in regularly. So you're trying to stay independent and grow your firm, and you have bills that are coming every month, both home and business. If you have employees, you have a payroll. And so whereas payments may come in every 90, 120 days. You have things that you need to, receivables, but payables, you need to pay bills every month. And so that was a huge thing, because if you're a sub-consultant, a lot of the firms, you have to wait until they submit an invoice and they're paid. So you're already 30 days behind. Then you have that spread between when they submit an invoice, or when you submit an invoice and then they submit it to the client. And then the client has a window, so they have to pay that prime firm, and then you get paid. So that alone, just that process, if everything goes clean, is 60 to 90 days. And who can work and run a business with 60 to 90 to 100-day, 120-day receivables? So I think that's part of it, is really having a dialogue about how long it takes to get paid, and maybe putting in some programs where you have an initial amount, kind of similar to a retainer, because I moved to a retainer type business model, because you just can't put that much time in the hole and pay top people and pay your business expenses and have some sort of life for yourself. Because there were a lot of times I'm seeing my employees buying homes and buying cars and things like that. And I felt like I was the last one to get it, because I'm the CEO, but I'm using a lot of my own money as kind of my operating reserves. And that was a challenge. So I think that also firms really having point people for deliverables, because when you start to send deliverables and work product, you want to be as seamless as possible. And a lot of times you're working with different firms who have different specs, different ways that they like to do information or receive information. And also, depending on who your project manager is, a different voice for how they write. And so you may have an employee and you're trying to meld within this organization and you're constantly spinning plates. So you get a lot of sometimes miscommunication and frustration in the quality of the deliverable, when it was really a communication issue. There really wasn't a competence issue. It was really, well, we kind of like it like this, but you did it like this. And the expectations when in the scope process were not set. So I think it's two things. It's the working capital and having a designated point person that is there to help mentor and really look at that work product and say, these are our goals. This is where you are. This is when we expect to receive work. This is how we want the work done. This is how we do business. And so I think those were the two, I would say, largest challenges that I had, are biggest obstacles, because you're bringing in employees and they have a voice, and you're trying to get your employees to also believe in you, but as well trust this big firm. So those were, I would say, glaring things that I felt like as a community support would have been better, or could have made the experience better. Not that it was bad, but that could have enhanced it.
Wow, it sounds like you have to kind of understand what those deliverables are ahead of time,
right?
What those expectations are, so you don't have those I guess those friction points, so to speak,
right?
That you have.
And
because everybody wants to be satisfied in what they're doing as far as executing the contract and doing it to the best of their ability, and no one getting mad.
Right.
Having these forced relationships instead of really developing a networking relationship that is seamless.
Right.
And I think that's the challenge in our space every day as we look at these contracts. Thanks for sharing that piece. Okay. Now we're going to pivot. Okay. You decided to just go ahead and leave the industry totally, and you decided to do something else. I read your bio. It doesn't reflect on anything we've talked about for the last 15 minutes.
No.
Won't you go ahead and share with me what you're doing now?
Now I, in a sense, I'm doing the same thing, but for different people. So what I did was I started to look at other people that wanted to work with cities and governments or small businesses. And so I took the 15 years, 20 years that I had worked exclusively with the public sector, and I've taken that and I've kind of flipped it and said, hey, other people who want to work with the public sector, they can do this, and this is how. because it's an art to it and it's a science. So writing proposals, invoicing, all of that type of information. In addition to that, there's a certain amount of executive coaching that goes along with that, because the business development cycle is a lot slower in the public sector than in the private sector. So when you're working with executives or people who want to procure work from a local agency, it's very different. It's very different looking at your centers of influence, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, those sorts of things. And so I just turned it inward to where there wasn't the MWDBE requirements. There wasn't, I could go to a city before, and if I wasn't certified, it was hard to people would say like, okay, you're not certified. And that took time and money. In addition, I've kind of gotten into some wellness things because I realized that one of the things with the pandemic was when you work with the public sector, you always, for the most part, you were taught that it's pretty disaster proof or recession proof, but nobody thought about pandemic proof. And so if I hadn't pivoted and started working with small businesses and people who wanted home-based business, I really would have been out of business, because I think about when I was in Pittsburgh, I was at Gateway Center and probably had about 5,000 square feet, office rent about 5,000 a month. If you slow down that revenue, you think about employees I would have had to lay off, my overhead. So now what I've decided to do is work from home. I help other people who want to do that. So if you want to have the big office downtown, which, not as much commercial space, that wouldn't be my suggestion, but how do I help you run your business? A lot of times you'll have a CEO that they're just afraid to admit, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I may have 10 employees or 12 employees, and they can't have that kind of conversation. So it's really outsourcing your COO a little bit in some of that coaching, like, yeah, no, what the heck are you doing? We're not going to do that. So that's how I've I'm still kind of in the industry, but they're not my target. I don't have the same target clients, but that's not what I lead with. It was it kind of wore you down doing exclusive public sector all the time, because it was, no matter what city you worked in, it was the receivables, it was the same firms, so you really had two clients. You have the actual agency, and then you have the engineering firm and whoever that principal in charge is. So serving two masters became very tough. Looking at politics, every 2 to 4 years, you're going to have a new administration maybe, or new people that they bring in. So really just turning it in, working with other small businesses. And I absolutely love that. I love helping people. I love not having the proposals and RFP and waiting 90 days to get paid and things like that. But the industry taught me a lot. And I still call on a lot of those people for my clients.
It seems like you took a step back and said, okay, I'm not dealing with all the mess because I've been through it, and I could coach other people and you could pay me via retainer for it.
Right. And
right?
I think it's maybe a lateral step, or just really just got to an inflection point. We have some challenges in the public sector, as you know, and there's also some social challenges. And so we had all of these things that started converging, and then really a lot of gender and race bias. Being a woman in this field is tough, and a lot of people aren't ready to have that conversation. And so it really kind of puts dog years on you. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's taking these experiences, which I think most people should do, and figure out how best to, in such perilous times, in times like this, where can you take your experience and make it work for you? What does it take as an entrepreneur for you to get sleep at night? And I think that's what I walk my clients through, because, if you're a small business, you're competing from, the $1 billion companies to another mom and pop, really. And so where do you shine at? And if it's helping other businesses do that. So it's actually helped me a lot to know what that process looks like. And I can actually help people with lessons learned. And I look at it as a positive. So it's great. I'm having a blast.
Oh, it sounds like you're having a good time. It doesn't sound like you're stressed.
Oh no, I'm ready. Now I'm ready to come back to Pittsburgh and help some other people. And like, hey, you want to work with the city? You want to work with Alcasan? Let's go. So that's exciting.
All right, we're coming up on our last few minutes. I
Okay.
guess, what other suggestions would you like to share with our audience? Tips?
I think it depends on if it's a professional services firm or if it's products. But I think the big thing is kind of really making sure from a foundational level that you are prepared to do business. And that means that you have your taxes together, you have your working capital, looking at the resources, looking at getting with someone like you and looking at the county and saying, hey, what resources do they have that can support me? I think a lot of times as small businesses and minority owned businesses, we really feel in a sense like under a microscope when we have to do, say for instance, certifications. You know, a lot of people don't know what goes into just being able to apply to be certified. You have to have, you know, the application is about 30 pages. You go through a lot. And so I think as you go through that process, you're going to make sure that you have all of your, you know, whether you're an LLC, S Corp, your overhead rate, getting all of that stuff together. I think taking the time to make sure that you're networking and marketing is huge because it's never ending. Although you're not in the business, you can still do business with people in the business. So I think getting serious and intentional about marketing and developing business is crucial. Being protective about your brand, who you are, because that is what I see. A lot of people don't spend the time really developing their brand, really making sure they're still committed to excellence. And what does that take? And if I had a lesson that I think I would tell other people is sitting down with your client at the beginning and saying, what do you expect from me? And what does success look like for you? Because what you think it is based on the scope and what they think it is may be totally different. And so you just want to make sure that when someone asks them about you, that your experience or what you think you did matches what they think you did. Also have fun with it. You know, you can't internalize a lot of it because you really have to develop some thick skin if you want to do business, if you want to be an entrepreneur. It's not going to be warm and fuzzy every day. And so you just have to be prepared for that. There are going to be days where you're like, somebody can buy my firm for 50 cents and get change back, but you know your why. So I think tapping into your why is so important. Know why you're doing it. And at the end of the day, just say, hey, failure is only a snapshot. Tomorrow's a new day. So if today doesn't go well, I'm just going to get back up and keep going.
There you go. Thanks again.
Thanks. I enjoyed it.
And sharing all your wisdom and knowledge about, you know, this contracting period. I mean, this whole process is challenging.
Right.
Looking forward, and you've made it kind of easy, so to speak, in understanding what people actually go through in the process and sharing those kind of intimate moments, but also inspiring our audience to kind of move forward and be successful because they can do it too. And
Right.
You've did it and you've demonstrated that.
Yes.
So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on my show. And don't be a stranger to Pittsburgh. Hopefully we'll be able to bring you back.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for all that you do.
All right. Take care now.
Thanks.